that's where non-invasive diagnostics are going to be able to play an important role. It's not detecting disease, it's preventing disease through early stage detection and through advanced adenoma detection. And I think that's where I want to be as a researcher, as a clinician. I don't think detecting stage 4 cancer is helpful for patients. I think detecting a large high-grade dysplasia before it becomes cancer is going to be helpful for patients.
Dr. Erica Barnell, welcome to the Scope Forward show. You're the Chief Science Officer and co-founder for Genoscopy. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time, and I'm glad that we're getting together.
Thank you for having me on the show. I couldn't be more excited to be here.
Erica, I have an AI agent to introduce you. What better way?
Ladies and gentlemen, I am thrilled to introduce Dr. Erica Barnell, a distinguished figure in bioinformatics and precision oncology. A Cornell University alumna, Erica impressively completed a dual MD-PhD program at Washington University School of Medicine, showcasing her exceptional dedication to medical science. Dr. Barnell's groundbreaking thesis work revolutionized the analysis processes in precision oncology, leading to the development of innovative bioinformatic tools. Her academic excellence is evident in her 25 peer-reviewed publications, 3 patents in Geneoscopy's technology, and significant contributions to 2 oncology book chapters. At Geneoscopy, Erica is the mastermind behind the scientific vision and product development, focusing on the company's novel stool-based RNA technology. She played a crucial role in the development and validation of a multi-target stool RNA test, now awaiting FDA pre-market approval. This test, recognized by the FDA as a breakthrough device, is a game changer in colorectal cancer screening, especially for individuals under 50. Additionally, Dr. Barnell is advancing new products targeting autoimmune and inflammatory diseases. Her leadership in research and development, in collaboration with leading universities and biopharmaceutical companies, is pivotal in improving gastrointestinal disease diagnosis, monitoring, and treatment. Please join me in warmly welcoming a true pioneer in medical science, Dr. Erica Barnell.
Can I take him with me? He's wonderful. Wow.
You can. His name is Charles, by the way, if you wanted to know. So is there any update, in your background? This was from the GI Mastermind when you came as a guest. Are there updates that we need to know?
I think he pretty much nailed it. We've updated some of those numbers with our recent publication in JAMA supporting our pivotal clinical trial for ColoSense. And we filed a couple of new patents in the IBD space to support our pipeline products. Other than that, I think Charles did a great job.
Awesome. Tell us about this new study on JAMA. I did see an update, but I want to hear more about it. What was the study about and what was published?
Genoscopy has been pretty laser focused for the last couple of years on developing its lead assay, which is a non-invasive test to screen average risk individuals over the age of 45 for both colorectal cancer and advanced adenomas. And I think the last time we had spoken, we talked about kind of some of the preclinical trials we completed, but most recently we underwent design lock of that assay. We completed about 28 analytical validation studies, and we completed our clinical validation study to support a pre-market approval application to the FDA. That application was submitted in January of this past year, and the clinical validation study, the results from that was published in JAMA in October.
And what did the results say?
It was really amazing. We actually recruited over 14,000 patients to participate in this study. The data analyzed about 9,000 individuals who both completed a ColoSense test and then subsequently a colonoscopy. And for the individuals that had colorectal cancer on a colonoscopy, the ColoSense demonstrated 94.4% sensitivity, which is the highest reported sensitivity for colorectal cancer disease for a non-invasive test. And then similarly, we reported 46% sensitivity for advanced adenomas, which are those precancerous lesions that are most likely to undergo malignant transformation over the coming years. And that, again, is the highest reported sensitivity in any pivotal study for advanced adenomas. These sensitivity profiles were achieved with an 88% specificity for no findings on a colonoscopy, which means that if you don't have any lesions, there's a 13% chance that our test might come back positive and you'd be referred to a colonoscopy. But we believe that this is the most accurate test that is a non-invasive test that could be provided to patients undergoing colorectal cancer screening.
I want to ask a very objective question, more from a science standpoint than from a business or company standpoint, right? Like my question is, there are a handful of non-invasive options available now. And how does this compare with the other options that are in existence as of today?
Currently, there's 3 different modalities that are approved for colorectal cancer screening. The fecal immunochemical test has been around for a number of years. There are certainly, issues with that test, including the fact that it must be done annually, which prevents a lot of patients from being compliant. And the sensitivity that's observed for that test is only 74% for colorectal cancer and in the 20s for advanced adenomas. So it's just not as sensitive as these more advanced molecular diagnostics. There's a Septin-9 test that was approved. It's a blood-based test. Again, it has a very similar profile to the FIT, just lower sensitivity for colorectal neoplasia. The most accurate test that's on the market is Exact Sciences Cologuard. They cite a 92% sensitivity for colorectal cancer and a 42% sensitivity for advanced adenomas. What we observed that the biggest issue with that test is that there's no data to support sensitivity in the 45 to 49 patient population. And what we know, because that test leverages methylation-based biomarkers, there's a degradation in accuracy in colorectal cancer and advanced adenomas if you're a younger patient. So what they saw in their supplemental study, for example, is while they cite a 42% sensitivity for advanced adenomas in 50 and up, their sensitivity in the 45 to 49 patient population was only 33%. So while that patient population just recently got added to the recommended individuals undergoing colorectal cancer screening, we really don't know how tests that are currently on the market perform in that patient population.
When liquid biopsy becomes mainstream, let's say that day will come when liquid biopsy does become mainstream, what would happen to all these different tests?
Our test is currently undergoing FDA approval as a pre-market approval application with a similar indication as those on the market. There's another test that was also submitted kind of in the same time frame as us that was produced by Guardant, which is a liquid biopsy company. I think that what we're seeing with liquid biopsy today, with the technology that we have, is that the sensitivity for colorectal cancer and the sensitivity for advanced is not sufficiently high enough to support the cost associated with that test. So for example, there was a cost-effective analysis that was produced in JAMA, I think about a week ago, that said that for the accuracy profile that's being cited from the ECLIPSE study, the test would need to be about $50. And right now they're charging about $1,000 per test. So I think there's a discrepancy in the accuracy profile and the amount that it costs to run those liquid biopsy tests. I think as we move forward, looking forward into the future, as technology advances, I think that accuracy profile is going to start creeping up, hopefully. For cancers where we don't have really good screening modalities, ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer, lung cancer, all those things where we don't have other non-invasive ways to test for disease, liquid biopsy is a game changer. I think for tests that we do have good screening modalities, like colon cancer, cervical cancer, breast cancer, maybe the accuracy profile might not be sufficient to support the cost associated with the test.
Would that change in the future? Because there's also Grail, there's also Freenome, there are a whole bunch of liquid biopsy companies in the pipeline.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, Gallery's been on the market for 2 years now, and I think they just reported they've done about 100,000 tests. I think there needs to be change in policy for those tests to be widely adopted, policy and kind of what we're using to demonstrate clinical validity. So, for example, I think the FDA is now putting out and helping to put out new guidelines to understand, how those tests can be integrated into the clinic. But right now we just don't know. And so it's really hard to justify paying for these very expensive tests that we don't know how much it impacts clinical outcomes. But I think with an improvement in accuracy and with, change in policy, these tests will ultimately be mainstream. Is it going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? I can't quite predict that, but, we're always improving science and trying to create new ways to help patients.
Let's say that it does get mainstream. How would that impact what you do?
Yeah, I think with our, first product that we have in the colorectal cancer screening space, again, if it ultimately has the sensitivity that's comparable to us, 50, 60% on advanced adenomas and, and 95+% on colorectal cancer, I think, we become obsoleted with that lead assay, which is completely fine. That's how, evolution works. Again, I don't think that's anytime in the very near future, but that's why Genoscopy is really committed to innovation. I think, while we've been laser focused on our colorectal cancer screening test over the last 5 years, we've also been building out our pipeline in other spaces within the gastrointestinal sphere. So I'm personally very excited about the work that we've been doing in IBD. I think that field needs more precision medicine to help both physicians and patients. And it's a really confusing field right now, unless you're, at a very, very large academic center and have a lot of resources. And so I would like to be able to continue to improve our pipeline and think about the other ways in which we can impact the field.
So let's rewind the clock a little bit, Erica. How did you get started? Backstory here behind Genoscopy.
I started my career in the GI field as an undergraduate researcher. So I was completing university at Cornell, but I had been conducting research in my hometown in St. Louis, and we were looking at ways to diagnose environmental enteropathy for children in Africa. And it's a nonspecific gut inflammation that causes growth faltering, and it's completely asymptomatic. So you don't know which kids are going to get it and which don't. And so I was tasked with trying to identify which kids had disease, provide intervention, and prevent that growth faltering. And when you're thinking about kids in Africa, you can't scope them. You don't have great clinics. You don't have a cold chain. You've got to be creative. And so we just had the moms send us diapers. And we developed a really cool technology to pull down the human cells from the diapers, lyse them open, look at the transcriptome, and identify which kids had disease. And I thought to myself, this is really amazing technology. Why don't we do this in the US? Why don't we apply it to things I'm seeing in the clinic, things that, afflict individuals here, like colon cancer and IBD and IBS and celiac. And when I went to my PI, he said, yeah, we could certainly do that, but, I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't have interest. I love doing my research, but go have fun. So when I matriculated to the MD PhD program, I pulled that technology out of the university and founded Genoscopy. So that was kind of our origin story.
Interesting. And you've started the company with your brother. How does that go? And what does he do? And what do you do in the company?
It's so funny, Praveen. I get either people say I would never be able to start a company with my sibling, which is much more common, or that sounds like so much fun. And for me, it's the latter. I truly love working with my brother. He's an MBA from Wharton. He has, 4 years in healthcare investment banking and private equity. And so together we are a pretty unstoppable force, I would say, with him on the business side and me on the science side. And, with entrepreneurship, you have such a volatile kind of day where in the morning you're really excited about something, and then by the end of the day there's 10 or 12 fires you have to put out and you kind of start it over the next day. So to have somebody that I just intrinsically trust, that I know is going to keep me accountable, that I enjoy working with, it's been inordinately helpful to ensure that we're successful at Genoscopy.
Just so that people listening or watching know the kind of business impact that the company has made, can you give us an update on how much money Genoscopy as a startup has raised totally?
Yeah, we've gone through the entire gauntlet of fundraising. So we started with 20,000 of founder seed money. We did $1 million friends and family round, and then we did about a $12 million Series A. And then last year we raised 105 million Series B. That was a combination of debt and equity. We're currently raising our Series C, which is going to be about 100 million to support the launch of our ColoSense test, as well as our pipeline work that we're doing in IBD. So I think, we've definitely gone through what they recommend in business school for raising funds, for sure.
Very exciting. And then congratulations to all of you for pulling this off. It's fantastic. Why are the investors funding companies such as yours? What is the thesis? What did you tell them? What do they want you to do? What's the underlying thesis here?
A lot of people talk about investors will invest in good ideas. And I think we've not really seen that to be true. I think Genoscopy is a great idea. And I think what we're doing is unbelievably important and will save lives. But what we've seen is the investors who are backing us see how we execute and see how we execute well. We are very conscious of what's going on in the environment. We're very conscious of what's going on externally, and we are able to pivot effectively and leverage the resources we have to be successful. And so what I'm seeing is investors tend to invest in people that they trust to do things, because inevitably things go wrong, things happen, COVID happens, things you can't foresee, and you have to be able to pivot and be successful despite those obstacles. An example being, we were conducting a clinical validation study during a pandemic. That brought new challenges that nobody had foreseen. There's not a guidebook to execute a clinical validation study in a pandemic. So we had to create this really novel way to recruit patients for our clinical validation study. And what we observed is not only were we able to do it very cost effectively relative to other companies that were executing similar clinical trials, but we did it in 12 months, which is unprecedented. So I think being creative, being scrappy, having that chutzpah, if you will, has been inordinately helpful to get investors on board and believe in your mission.
The next 100 million is being raised for what aspects of the business? Where's it going to go?
It's three aspects, really. As we move towards FDA approval of the ColoSense test, it will be to support commercialization efforts of that assay. The second, as I mentioned, we're building out pipeline in the IBD space. So we are developing a test to both evaluate disease activity for patients with IBD, as well as predict therapeutic response for certain biologics for individuals with IBD. So it'll be supporting kind of the product development life cycle for that test. And the third is we've actually accumulated a number of different pharmaceutical companies who are interested in integrating our platform technology into their phase trials for approval of their therapeutics. So we announced most recently our partnership with Adeso Therapeutics. And then we have a number of other ongoing pipeline pilot studies with big pharma to integrate into their clinical trials. So those three efforts will all be pursued in parallel over the next couple of years.
I also saw an announcement about a partnership with Labcorp. What are these new partnerships about? And are you earning money through this? So is it commercialized? So I'm curious. Yeah.
Yeah, we have an amazing relationship with Labcorp. They've been part of our investment rounds in the last 2 rounds that we've completed. And they have seen, again, how well we execute as a company. And truly believe in our mission to commercialize our ColoSense test once we get approval. And so they're unbelievably supportive. The partnership there is we would be leveraging the resources that they have to get our tests in the hands of physicians and patients. I think other companies have taken a different route where they build their own sales force, they have their own reps. That can be inordinately expensive. Those companies have yet to demonstrate profitability. And so I think for us, through leveraging this relationship, we're going to be able to demonstrate profitability very quickly. And I think, as we start thinking about where we want to be in the next 2, 5, 10 years, I don't think we want to be a company that's really focused on marketing and commercialization and hosting PGA tournaments and sponsoring football teams. I want to help patients. I want to build more products. I want to build better diagnostics. I want to improve on the assay that we've already built to get that advanced adenoma sensitivity up, to get that colorectal cancer sensitivity up, to pull up that specificity. And I'd rather leverage the resources that we have to focus on the science than to try to market. And so that's just the pathway we've chosen at Genoscopy.
When I look up all the latest updates on Genoscopy, you can't not come across the lawsuit. What's that about?
Yeah, I think it's common in the field. I think if you Google lawsuits diagnostics, you'd see a million tabs. At Genoscopy, we're committed to innovation. We deeply respect intellectual property rights. And I personally think that in medicine, we've been collecting stool samples from our patients for decades, and therefore we're highly confident in the strength of our intellectual property and freedom to operate there. And we strongly reject the infringement claims posed by Exact Sciences. I think our assays are novel, they're different, they're important, they will save lives. And we're going to vigorously defend our ability to bring this patent technology to clinicians and patients and be able to offer more options that are more accurate for colorectal cancer screening.
All the best for that. So for me from the outside, when I look at all this activity, so I know that there is some concern somewhere, which is interesting because when I look at all this from an industry standpoint, the game of non-invasive detection of colorectal cancer or any cancer eventually is heating up. And this momentum is only going to increase. So ultimately, all this is going to do good for patients. So from that standpoint, it's probably headed in the right direction from an industry standpoint. But let's, get to the science, Erica, and that's, home for you. If you were to explain this to a 10-year-old, I want to get to the basics of what your technology is and what is the science behind the technology, even starting from explaining, why RNA.
Absolutely. So, I think there's two components that makes Genoscopy's technology so accurate. The first is we're looking at stool samples. So stool samples are the direct source of the cells that have disease, right? We're actually pulling down the cells from the colon cancer. We're pulling down the cells from the inflammation that causes IBD. So it's a direct source of the tissue of interest. It's kind of like a non-invasive biopsy, whereas blood is a little bit more dispersed, right? You're hoping that those cells are getting into the blood, but it's really like looking for a needle in a haystack, whereas it's a little bit easier for us to pull out that signal relative to the noise. So I think that's the first reason that we believe stool samples are a little bit better than blood in terms of accuracy. The second is what you were touching on, which is DNA versus RNA versus protein. We all know that central dogma, right? The DNA is kind of the cookbook. You read it, you know what to do. I view the RNA as kind of the ingredients, right? You read the cookbook and then you start putting everything together. And then the protein is the cake. It's the final product that you use to actually do things within a cell. What we've observed and what the field has observed through biopsy studies is that RNA is very dynamic. It's a direct reflection of what's happening in the cell. It can change pretty instantaneously with insult, like a cancer, a malignant transformation, like an inflammation event, like a stricturing event. And so what we're pulling down and looking at, the RNA, is hopefully more reflective of what's happening in the cell in real time. We think that with regards to our ColoSense test and the kind of oncology vertical, RNA is specifically better at detecting disease in the younger patient populations relative to DNA and specifically relative to methylation-based biomarkers, which we know methylation is an age-related process. So the older you are, the more likely methylation is to play a role. But when you're thinking about trying to detect cancer and precancerous lesions in younger patient populations, RNA is likely to be more sensitive relative to methylation DNA biomarkers. And then the other thing that's really important is, beyond oncology, RNA is really the only biomarker that you could use to leverage or to detect disease. So for example, in IBD and IBS and celiacs, there's really not any DNA changes that happen. There are no variants associated with that disease that are not germline predisposing variants. So when we're thinking about expanding our pipeline into inflammatory, autoimmune, infectious diseases, RNA is really the only biomarker that's going to be accurate in that patient population.
I'm going to ask a very naive question, perhaps. So, how did you pick colon cancer? So when I hear you describe this, could this not apply for even other types of cancers?
I think, this was just kind of an opportunity that I saw at the time based on what I was seeing in the clinic. So I mentioned that I matriculated to the MD PhD program, and I had been doing this research in environmental enteropathy. In kind of my first rotation, I met a woman who presented to the hospital with stage 4 colorectal cancer. And, she was over the age of 50. And so I asked why she hadn't gotten a colonoscopy. And she said that she didn't have time to take off work. And, she has kids at home. And it was just really devastating for me to hear that. And I thought to myself, I've got this amazing technology that I'm developing to treat kids in Africa. And I met this woman who has colorectal cancer and needed a non-invasive option. And so I just kind of put those two things together. And that was the impetus for our lead assay. But I do think that, this is a platform technology. I could not be more excited to get back to my inflammatory roots, which is where I started. And so, as the ColoSense test moves towards commercialization, I think moving to IBD and IBS is going to be really exciting. But to your point, we're definitely going to be pursuing other GI cancers, including potentially pancreatic cancer or an upper GI cancer like gastric cancer. And then I also think that this platform could be applied to other cancers like transitional cancer, which is in the GU system, GIGU system, and similarly ovarian or endometrial cancer and things like that.
Once again, just pressing on the same lines, so when, a trigger for you was you met this patient who had later stage cancer, by that time, based on what I observed, it's already spread in more than one location, right? So it's just not one type of cancer anymore. It's gone beyond the source. It's gone to even multiple locations. So how does that play out in terms of diagnoses and especially in terms of RNA and through stool?
I think that's actually one of the biggest advantages in our clinical validation study, that JAMA publication that we presented in October. We didn't have any stage 4 colorectal cancers. We cited a 94.4% sensitivity for cancers, and none of them were stage 4, right? We had 100% stage 1 colorectal cancer sensitivity. That's where non-invasive diagnostics are going to be able to play an important role. It's not detecting disease, it's preventing disease through early stage detection and through advanced adenoma detection. And I think that's where I want to be as a researcher, as a clinician. I don't think detecting stage 4 cancer is helpful for patients. I think detecting a large high-grade dysplasia before it becomes cancer is going to be helpful for patients. And beyond that, one of the things that we did in that clinical trial that was really important, and I think also something that's going to help differentiate us from our competitors, is that we enrolled patients that were non-compliant with current recommended screening guidelines. So we completed a decentralized clinical trial where we actually enrolled patients online using social media. And through that method, 70% of patients did not have a colonoscopy scheduled at the time of enrollment. That's in stark contrast to site-based models, other tests that have done their clinical validation study, where 100% of patients have a colonoscopy scheduled, right? They're intervening at the endoscopy center. So we're reaching patients that don't have a colonoscopy scheduled, are not participating in colorectal cancer screening. And through that clinical trial, we actually had to navigate patients to a colonoscopy. And we're going to employ that method when we launch commercially, where any patient that has a positive ColoSense test could subsequently be navigated to a colonoscopy within their network and within their geographical location to make sure that they're getting that follow-up colonoscopy to have those lesions removed, to have those cancers detected. And that's really important to us to kind of close the loop on colorectal cancer screening.
Erica, I have a public health question. You've seen so much of data, and you're a scientist, you're a researcher. You've seen vast amounts of data pertaining to this area, particularly colon cancer and maybe beyond. When you view all this from a societal and public health standpoint, what stood out for you and what caught you by surprise? Are there any insights that you had, that you might usually share on the dinner table with family, saying that, why are things like this or whatever, but anything on those lines, any reflections?
Yeah, I think that's another thing that I wanted to do as a scientist is be as transparent as humanly possible with our clinical validation study. So we provided a very extensive supplement that allows individuals to really break down our test performance into various subgroups and try to understand, what our sensitivity profile would be for your patient population. I think that's really important for clinicians. One thing that we observed that was really disheartening is there was a really huge dropout of individuals who completed a ColoSense test, but then subsequently did not get a colonoscopy. And a lot of those individuals were considered high risk based on socioeconomic and demographic status. Individuals that were older, individuals that were Black or African American, individuals that had low annual household income, individuals that were in rural areas. And I think, again, what I'm very passionate about is getting those patients that had a positive ColoSense test to a colonoscopy. In our study, we weren't really allowed to provide the results back to the patient, but commercially, we can say, listen, you had a positive test. I know you don't want to do it. We've got you an appointment with this physician. You're going to love it. Please go. We can provide ride shares to those individuals, partner with Uber to try to get individuals access to healthcare and make sure that they go get that follow-on colonoscopy to get lesions removed. So, I think that was one of the big learnings we had was patients who might otherwise not have completed any colorectal cancer screening are completing our test and then might not go to the colonoscopy unless we help. And so I really want to provide that help as kind of a public health effort. We're not going to get paid for it, but I think it's important.
How far are you from commercialization?
That's a great question. We base it on kind of the recommended guidance from the FDA. They put out guidance related to kind of their timelines and what they do on their end. There's an FDA clock that we're on, and it can stop or go at any time based on kind of where we sit on that clock. We have a couple months left to have a final decision on our PMA application. I'd say it's kind of like football, where the last 2 minutes can take a really long time if they've got enough timeouts left and things like that. So, there's certainly uncertainty around exactly when we're going to get FDA approval, but we've had a number of amazing communications with the FDA, and we think we're hopefully getting close to that decision.
So once that happens, I think what I want to ask is, I understand what you're saying. So there's uncertainty there. And let's say you cross that gate. Would you be ready to go live soon after? Would physicians, gastroenterologists be able to prescribe your test? How is that going to work? How is it going to look operationally?
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest benefits with our partnership with Labcorp, right? They're selling tests every single day. They have reference labs around the country. They have a huge sales force. So we're working with them right now to integrate into their software so that when we get FDA approval, we can go live as quickly as possible. And, anybody who orders a CBC through Labcorp or a lipid panel could find the ColoSense test as well and order that. And that's something our software team is actively working on. I think, there's two things with healthcare. The person who prescribes the test, the person who takes the test, and the person who pays for the test, they're all different entities. So we definitely have to get our ducks in a row on all three of those fronts. I'd say with the ordering from a physician, getting that FDA approvals, the main goal there, with getting paid for, we definitely need to get CMS approval and kind of go through those pathways and negotiate with payers. We have an amazing market access team, so I think in those conversations are going really well, but it does take time. That being said, I think we'll be able to be in the hands of patients very shortly after FDA approval.
Excellent. All the best for that to you and your team, Erica. So let's talk about the future. What is your vision of the future of gastroenterology, future of medicine? Where's all this going? If you were to pick a timeline of, let's say, 5 years or so, where would science be? Where would GI be?
Future is bright. I think that every single field of medicine is currently gaining traction with regards to integrating innovation and technology and AI and everything to help physicians do their jobs a little bit better and take some of that administrative burden off of physicians so that they can just treat their patients, right? That's what we want. We don't want to keep writing soap notes and, copying and pasting over and over to meet the RVU requirements. So I think that within GI, the same thing is happening. We're integrating AI into scopes. We're integrating, novel technology, whether it be RNA-based or DNA-based or methylation-based, to better diagnose disease. I think with specific regards to IBD, we're in a place today that we were in oncology 10 years ago. So I think, when I was doing my PhD, we were really trying to understand how to integrate precision medicine into oncology. Foundation One came out, Foundation Heme, Foundation Medicine, a number of different assays were being developed to dictate therapy for patients with cancer, regardless of where the cancer was located. Prior to that time, it was like, oh, you've got breast cancer, we're going to treat you with this. You have kidney cancer, we're going to treat you with this. And now we leverage precision medicine approaches to better stratify risk for our patient. And I think that's where we are with IBD today. There's a number of different mechanisms of action that are going to be coming to the market very soon. There's an inordinate amount of money and effort being put into developing tests and developing therapeutics for those patients, and we want to be a part of that conversation. I think we are really primed to develop a test that can predict which therapy would be most efficacious for an individual. And as we start integrating ourselves into the various pharmaceutical clinical trials, we can potentially, tack on new companion diagnostics for each one of those mechanisms of action. So I think we're really primed to do exactly what Foundation Medicine did 10 years ago. And as we start integrating into these clinical trials, into the various new mechanisms of action that are coming onto the market, we'll be able to really effectively create companion diagnostics to dictate which patients will be efficacious for which therapeutics.
How does the company use AI?
You have to leverage these new technologies if you want to be innovative, if you want to keep up. And so we definitely leverage AI across the entire vertical at Genoscopy, whether it be marketing to make sure that we're integrating that into our customer-facing applications, whether it be, within our machine learning models to iterate over and create better models that are better predicting disease. We leverage it, kind of almost again within every aspect to make sure that we're having the best tools going into our diagnostics. I think it's a double-edged sword. You have to make sure that whatever is going into the AI system is perfect so that what comes out of the AI system is perfect. And then also designing, how the algorithms are processing, that is very humanized. We have to tell them what to do and make sure that our directions are sufficient so that we're getting output that is doing exactly what we want. Again, I think you have to use it to be a part of the conversation today.
As we wrap up our conversation, what I want to ask you from a private practice gastroenterologist standpoint is that, should a private GI physician be worried or excited?
Excited, 100% excited.
I'm sure you're going to say that. So let me ask the question a little bit differently. Who should be worried and who would be excited? Given everything that's happening and given your insights and given what you know about where things are going.
It's actually funny. Sam Altman, I think again, the CEO of OpenAI, he went to my high school and he gave a talk at my high school for our centennial a couple of months ago. And, I think he said it so right. Everyone should be excited about this. This is just, it makes our lives easier. It makes our jobs easier. Predicting where we're going to be in the future is impossible. And I don't know where AI is going to be in 5, even 2 years from now. But I do know that it's just going to help improve our lives and make our lives a lot easier. And I mentioned it before, but I think the burnout in healthcare is so great because of the massive administrative burden that is imposed on us to document everything. And as we continue to integrate AI into documentation, into kind of our electronic health records and services, it's just going to make physicians' lives a lot easier and more tolerable so that they can get home to their family on time and not feel like they're sacrificing their patients' healthcare. I think the people that need to be worried are the Blockbusters, are the Kinkos, are the Kodaks. Like, if you're unable to embrace change and unable to see how this can benefit you, it's going to be a really difficult transition. As mentioned, if it's not something that you wholeheartedly embrace and try to integrate into your company, you're going to lag and fall behind. And I think that that would be challenging for some individuals who have built, a company on not having AI in their systems.
So someone's, out there going to be thinking that, hey, it's easy for you to say as a scientist and researcher doing this as a day job, I have to meet RVUs and I have to be in the endoscopy room. Who's got the time? And I got to fill my EHR. How do I go about staying relevant?
Yeah. And I think, again, the burden might not be on the physician. I think from a kind of regulatory standpoint, from a global standpoint, and medicine's not great at doing this, right? We still have beepers and fax machines, but I think there needs to be change systemically to make sure that the hospital system you're in supports that, right? That you have scopes that have AI integrated in them so you're better at detecting polyps, so that you can maintain that ADR that's comparable to other GIs at centers where they have, embraced that technology and have integrated it. So I think the burden doesn't necessarily fall on the physician, right? It falls on the hospital administrators, it falls on the CEOs of hospital systems to make sure that their physicians have the resources that they need to do their job. Again, I know we as a group are very archaic when it comes to some technologies. It's a big lift, but my hope is that people are starting to embrace it.
Excellent. Erica, this was fantastic. Any final reflections as we wrap up our conversation?
Oh, gosh, thank you so much for having me. I love speaking with you, and your show is amazing. So I really appreciate being on here.
Thank you so much. Dr. Erica Barnell, Chief Science Officer and co-founder of Genoscopy. What a fantastic conversation. Thanks so much for coming on the Scope Forward show.
Thank you.